You've heard of the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth. They've been used in sermons, parables, and cautionary tales for centuries, warning us about the flaws that lead to ruin. But what most people don't know is this: each one of those sins was said to have a ruler, not just a demon but a prince, a monarch of hell who doesn't just personify the sin, but commands it, spreads it, thrives on it. These aren't the cartoon devils with pitchforks and red skin. They are ancient, layered, and terrifying in ways that go beyond horns and fire. They represent the absolute worst of us, taken to its farthest extreme. And in the old grimoires, the demonology texts banned by churches and hidden in vaults, you'll find their names, etched beside strange sigils, surrounded by warnings. Some, like Asmodeus or Beelzebub, you might recognize. Others, like Belphegor or Mammon, live in the shadows of forgotten theology. But even among them, one name is always at the center: Lucifer. So today we're going to tell the real story. Not a sermon, not a fable, just the clearest look we can take into the underworld's highest ranks. This is the story of the 7 princes of hell and the sins they were born to rule. Lucifer, Prince of Pride. There's a reason Lucifer's name still lingers across cultures, religions, and legends, whispered in fear, written in warning, invoked in rebellion. But the Lucifer people think they know is often a shadow of the one described in older texts. Because long before hell had a throne, before angels were even known to fall, Lucifer was light. Not metaphorically, literally. The light bringer. That's what his name means. Lucem Ferae, from Latin, a radiant being who once stood near the very center of divine authority, not as an outsider, but as one of heaven's most cherished creations. Lucifer wasn't crafted in darkness. He wasn't born to destroy or deceive. In early theological writings, especially within Christian and apocryphal traditions, he is described as the most beautiful of all angels, towering in form, brilliant in appearance. He didn't simply reflect glory, he embodied it. Some called him the morning star, a symbol of unmatched brilliance. Others described him as the one whose voice could move the heavens, whose presence shone with a brilliance that surpassed understanding. He didn't just serve in the court of heaven, he belonged at the highest tier. But that was the beginning. And beginnings rarely last. Lucifer's fall didn't come from hatred or rebellion in the way we usually think of it. It came from something far more human, something far more familiar: pride. Not the kind rooted in joy or self-respect. Not the pride that lifts, but the kind that clouds judgment, that isolates, that whispers, "You deserve more." And Lucifer listened. It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't rage. It was certainty. The certainty that his brilliance wasn't just a gift, it was proof. Proof that he should rule. Proof that submission was beneath him. He didn't hate the throne. He just believed he belonged on it. And that belief spread. Lucifer didn't fall alone. According to tradition, he convinced 1/3 of the angels in heaven to follow him, not through threats, not with chains, but with ideas, with charisma, with promises of something greater. He was the first revolutionary, and his revolution was rooted not in chaos, but in confidence. When the rebellion failed, as it always was going to, it wasn't just a defeat. It was a collapse, a shattering of hierarchy, and Lucifer, once draped in light, was cast down, not into fire, but into absence. The absence of God, the absence of favor, the absence of the light he once carried so effortlessly. But here's the thing: many traditions, especially older ones, don't describe Lucifer as being stripped of his beauty. Even in his fall, he remains radiant, still stunning, still angelic, still persuasive. And that's part of what makes him dangerous. Because when evil looks like evil, it's easy to avoid. But when it still carries the echo of brilliance, when it wears the same face that once inspired awe, that's when it slips past your guard. Lucifer's personality, according to occult lore, isn't overtly cruel. He's not a torturer. He's not deranged. He's eloquent, patient. He speaks in riddles not to confuse, but because he assumes you should be smart enough to keep up. He doesn't raise his voice, he simply waits for you to recognize that he's right. There's an intensity behind his calmness, the quiet confidence of someone who still believes the world would have been better had he won. His symbolism runs deep. Pride is often treated as the root of all sin, not because it's the loudest, but because it opens the door. It convinces you that rules are for others, that guidance is control, that you've outgrown the need to follow. Pride at its worst is a kind of spiritual narcissism, and Lucifer is its blueprint. Even now, Lucifer's influence isn't always direct. He doesn't tempt through horror or cruelty. He tempts through brilliance, through the desire to be worshipped, to be revered, to be remembered. He offers not chaos, but freedom with a crown. And that's why, in many modern retellings, his story continues to resonate. Because rebellion, especially when it's dressed in enlightenment, can be seductive. His appearance, too, remains striking. In most grimoires, Lucifer is described not with grotesque features, but with angelic beauty preserved, wings still vast, eyes still bright, sometimes crowned, sometimes veiled in unapproachable light. He is the kind of figure that doesn't need to threaten. You look at him and you understand what he used to be, what he almost was. His key feat, of course, is the rebellion itself. No other prince of hell can claim such a role. He wasn't corrupted by another force. He was the catalyst, the leader, the one who looked at perfection and said, "I can do better." That's not just sin, it's divine arrogance. And yet, even now, there's debate about who Lucifer truly is. In many modern traditions, his name is conflated with Satan. They're seen as one and the same. But if you dig through the older texts, especially those of medieval demonologists and early Christian mystics, there's a clear difference. Lucifer is the fallen prince of pride, the one who fell because he couldn't bear to kneel. Satan, or Sathanas, as we'll explore later, is the accuser, the punisher, the wrath of the damned. They are different faces of rebellion, and it's important to understand that distinction. Because Lucifer's power doesn't come from force, it comes from conviction. He doesn't break the world, he offers a better one. And that's what makes him dangerous, because even in the shadows, he still shines. Mammon, Prince of Greed. If Lucifer fell because he believed he deserved the throne, Mammon is the one who believes he can simply buy it. He's the whisper in the mind that says, "More will fix it. More gold, more property, more power." Whatever the soul lacks, Mammon insists it can be bought. But his sin isn't just greed in the economic sense. It's the idea that anything, love, loyalty, even salvation, has a price, and that you should own it. The name Mammon comes from Aramaic origins, translating roughly to wealth or profit. But by the time he appears in medieval Christian writings, the name doesn't just represent riches, it represents the worship of wealth. The Gospel of Matthew frames it perfectly. You cannot serve both God and Mammon. In that one line, Mammon is elevated from concept to force, a power that demands allegiance, just like any deity. And many have given it willingly. Descriptions of Mammon vary depending on the source, but one detail always remains. He is never satisfied. Some depict him as grotesquely bloated, sagging with coin-stuffed flesh, gold pouring from his lips, rings on every finger. Others show him gaunt and hollow, a living vault, skeletal, wrapped in chain, jeweled eyes sunken deep into a skull-like face. In both forms, the message is the same. His wealth doesn't sustain him. It eats him from within. Where Lucifer leads with ideology and vision, Mammon speaks in terms. Everything is a negotiation. You don't pray to Mammon, you bargain with him. And he always makes the deal sound reasonable. Is it really wrong to want more? Haven't you earned it? He frames greed as reward, hoarding as security, excess as evidence of success. But his interest in you is never personal. You are just another asset. What sets Mammon apart from other princes isn't just his association with money, it's his obsession with value. Everything must be measured, priced, weighed. If it can't be owned, it's worthless. He doesn't understand sacrifice unless it comes with interest. He doesn't see people, he sees investments. And once he's in your mind, he makes you see the world the same way. In older grimoires, Mammon is rarely described as overtly violent. He doesn't command legions to conquer. He simply buys them. Power is something to be acquired, not fought for. Loyalty is rented. Worship is purchased. Even the throne of hell in Mammon's eyes should go to the one who can pay for it outright. Stories of Mammon's influence often center around kings who bled their people for gold, or merchants who traded their souls for monopolies. He shows up wherever wealth becomes obsession. He's the reason palaces become prisons, where fortunes sit untouched while their owners die clutching their ledgers. He doesn't need to offer damnation. He offers security and waits while it consumes you. The tragedy of Mammon is that his followers rarely realize they've fallen. Greed doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like ambition, planning, success, and by the time they've traded everything sacred for material gain, they've already become hollow. Symbolically, Mammon stands for emptiness disguised as abundance. He's the embodiment of the lie that if you just had more money, influence, admiration, you'd finally be whole. But the more you feed the hunger, the bigger it grows. He is the prince of famine disguised as feast. And there's no end to the craving he cultivates. He doesn't promise fire or power, he promises comfort. And that, more than anything, is how he wins. Asmodeus, Prince of Lust. If Mammon tempts with gold, Asmodeus tempts with touch. He is the one who doesn't whisper in your ear but breathes down your neck. The patron of obsession, of desire that no longer cares about consequence. Lust as a sin often gets downplayed, dismissed as something frivolous, almost harmless. But Asmodeus is anything but harmless. His domain is not love, it is need without restraint. His origins are tangled. The name Asmodeus shows up in Jewish, Islamic, and Christian lore, sometimes as a demon of lust, sometimes as a destroyer, sometimes as a king. In the apocryphal Book of Tobit, he's infamous for killing 7 husbands in a row, all on their wedding night, consumed by a jealous fixation over a woman named Sarah. Not because he loved her, because he believed she should be his. That's the kind of lust Asmodeus rules. Not attraction, not beauty, but possession. Wanting someone or something so completely that their consent, their pain, even their life, no longer matters. Descriptions of Asmodeus vary, but most grimoires give him a striking, almost theatrical form. He's often shown with 3 heads, one of a man, one of a bull, and one of a ram, each symbolizing different shades of desire, intellectual, physical, and animalistic. He sometimes rides a dragon or serpent, holds a torch, and commands great legions. Some depict him as seductively human, others as monstrous. But no matter the form, he's always confident, always exposed, always unashamed. He doesn't hide what he is, because he doesn't believe it's wrong. That's the trick. Asmodeus doesn't offer forbidden pleasures as much as he removes the idea that anything should be forbidden. He reframes self-control as repression and restraint as weakness. And in doing so, he doesn't just corrupt the body, he corrodes the will. He has little interest in love. Love has boundaries. Love involves choice. Asmodeus prefers the kind of desire that consumes, that leaves nothing untouched, nothing sacred. He seduces not just with beauty, but with frustration, with fantasy, with the illusion that satisfaction is just one indulgence away. But like all temptations tied to lust, that feeling never lasts. And that's where Asmodeus thrives, in the aftermath, in the shame, in the spiral that begins when pleasure becomes addiction and intimacy becomes impulse. He's the prince of affairs that wreck lives, of obsessions that burn through marriages, of cravings that promise everything and leave only silence. Stories about him stretch far beyond Tobit. In medieval writings, Asmodeus is sometimes said to rule the gambling houses and brothels of hell, ensnaring souls not just through vice, but through a hunger for escape. In some interpretations, he is the architect of broken covenants, steering kings and clergy alike into scandals that unravel kingdoms. Symbolically, Asmodeus is the endpoint of unchecked desire. He doesn't just pull people into temptation, he convinces them that there's no reason to resist, that surrender is inevitable, and that wanting something is all the justification you need to take it. He doesn't force, he waits, because eventually everyone wants something badly enough. And when they do, Asmodeus is already there, smiling, patient, ready to help you ruin everything you love in the name of something you don't actually need. Hey everyone, just a quick intermission here. I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Did you know that over 80% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed to the channel? If you've enjoyed this content so far, it would be incredible if you could hit that subscribe button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel grow and ensures that you won't miss any more of our fascinating stories we explore together. Also, if you're feeling generous, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share with anyone else who may enjoy it. Your support really does make a difference and keeps the content coming. Thanks again, and let's get back to the story. Leviathan, Prince of Envy. Some demons seduce, others burn. But Leviathan waits below the surface, silent, brooding, cold. In the oldest texts, Leviathan wasn't even a demon in the traditional sense. In the Hebrew Bible, particularly in the book of Job, Leviathan is described as a sea monster, a force of nature, terrifying and untamable, a coiling serpent that no man can master. Over time, as demonology evolved, that image shifted. The beast in the depths became something else, something more personal, more human, more dangerous. It became envy, and Leviathan became its prince. Envy is unlike the other deadly sins. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It hides behind the smile at a friend's success, behind the applause at someone else's joy. It is by nature silent and rotting, a resentment that festers just beneath the skin. That's where Leviathan lives, not in violence or seduction, but in that internal sting that says, "Why not me?" Descriptions of Leviathan range from the mythic to the monstrous. Some traditions describe a massive dragon or sea serpent, jaws wide enough to swallow cities, scales as hard as iron, eyes glowing like submerged fire. Others describe it more metaphorically, as a presence felt rather than seen, a pressure behind the ribs, a heaviness in the soul. When Leviathan is near, joy tastes bitter, and peace feels like mockery. Where Asmodeus tempts with what you want, Leviathan poisons what others already have. He sows unrest, not by taking anything from you, but by convincing you that what you have will never be enough. He whispers that happiness is zero-sum, that every victory not yours is a loss. He doesn't need you to hate, he just needs you to feel left behind. Personality-wise, Leviathan is restrained but watchful. He doesn't rage, he waits. He's cold, patient, and calculating. His envy isn't loud, it's simmering, always there, feeding itself on every good thing that isn't his. And when he moves, it isn't to destroy, it's to drag down, to take what's above and pull it beneath the waves. In apocryphal and mystical writings, Leviathan is sometimes paired with Behemoth, the beast of the land, and Ziz, the bird of the air. But while those creatures symbolize strength or sovereignty, Leviathan is always the corrupter, the one who takes what is whole and twists it. In later Christian demonology, especially among French and German occult circles, Leviathan comes to represent the sin that divides, especially within the church or the family. He is said to cause schisms, break alliances, tear apart communities, not with war, but with jealousy. A word here, a suspicion there. until unity dissolves, and nothing remains but fragments. Leviathan symbolism is deeply psychological. Envy is a sin of comparison. It doesn't crave an object, it craves the removal of joy from others. It doesn't just want what you have, it wants you to lose it. It wants to erase every reminder that something might be better, brighter, or more beloved than you. And when it fully takes hold, it doesn't lead to action but to isolation. You don't fight, you withdraw. You don't shout, you seethe, until every beautiful thing around you feels like a threat. That's Leviathan's victory, not domination, but contamination. And like the sea that bears his name, his work is slow, relentless, and silent. Beelzebub, Prince of Gluttony. Where Leviathan hides in the deep, Beelzebub spreads across the surface like rot. He's not subtle, he's not quiet. He's consumption made flesh, constant, open-mouthed, and foul. In ancient Canaanite worship, Beelzebub likely began as Baal-zebul, an exalted lord. He was a deity of authority and presence, possibly associated with the weather or storms or kingship itself. But over time, as enemy gods were rebranded by rival faiths, his name was twisted. What once meant prince or lord was reworded as Lord of the Flies, not because of insects, but because of decay. His altars were said to swarm with flies. His name became synonymous with filth, waste, and rot. And in the process, he became a symbol of gluttony. The sin of excess turned to sickness. But gluttony in Beelzebub's realm isn't just about food. That's the surface reading. The deeper version is far more disturbing. His domain is consumption without restraint, a hunger that doesn't stop, not just for food, but for attention, for validation, for more of anything and everything. If it feeds, he wants it, and he doesn't care if it kills him. He'd prefer it if it did. Descriptions of Beelzebub across grimoires are anything but elegant. He's often bloated, his skin sagging, his eyes sunken and wet. In some depictions, he has the body of a monstrous fly, his wings torn and twitching, his mouth oozing from decades of indulgence. He is surrounded by decay, not because he creates it directly, but because it follows him, the inevitable byproduct of his appetite. And yet, he is not low in hell's hierarchy. Quite the opposite. Beelzebub is often described as second only to Lucifer. He's a prince of immense power, commanding entire armies of demons, and his presence, while grotesque, is commanding. He doesn't apologize for his rot, he wears it like a crown. That's his personality in a word, unapologetic. He craves endlessly and doesn't care who suffers for it. If Mammon wants to own the world, Beelzebub wants to devour it. Piece by piece, soul by soul. Where you find famine, you often find him, not because he causes starvation, but because he's the one hoarding the harvest. Where you find people gorging themselves to fill an emotional hole, he's there too, feeding not just the body, but the idea that more will make it better. Beelzebub's symbolism is deceptively modern. Gluttony isn't just about greed, it's about the inability to stop. It's the sin of too much, taken too far. A sin that pretends it's pleasure, but ends in sickness. A hunger that grows sharper the more you feed it. And in that he thrives. Because gluttony promises you satisfaction, but all it delivers is emptiness that grows heavier every time you try to fill it. His most famous feat, ironically, is his fall. Once a god among men, Beelzebub was reduced to rot, and yet he adapted. In Demonology, he climbed higher than most, sitting on hell's inner council, commanding both respect and disgust. That's the paradox. He's rotting royalty, a king who feasts in filth and still expects to be obeyed. Because gluttony doesn't care what you're consuming, only that you never stop. And you can be sure that Beelzebub never does. Sathanas, Prince of Wrath. Few names carry as much weight as Satan, but when he's referred to as Sathanas, we're looking at a more focused role, a defined place in hell's hierarchy, separate from Lucifer. While Lucifer represents the pride that caused the fall, Sathanas is what came after, the burning rage that refuses to forgive, the fury that fuels vengeance without end. In his oldest form, the word Satan wasn't even a name, it was a title. In Hebrew, Ha-Satan means the accuser, a role, a prosecutor, someone who stands against. He wasn't evil in the beginning, he was necessary, God's appointed challenger, the one who questioned loyalty, tested faith, exposed hypocrisy. But somewhere along the line, the adversary became the enemy. And when that happened, Sathanas took shape, not just as a rebel but as a ruler, a prince of hell with a specific dominion: wrath. Where Lucifer challenges by charisma, Sathanas challenges by fire. His wrath is not blind, it's focused, purposeful. He sees injustice in everything and answers it with fury. He doesn't whisper temptations. He fans the flames already inside you. The grudge you hold, the betrayal that won't let go, the moment you snapped, that's where he lives. His appearance is never gentle. Sathanas is warlike, fiery, armored, sometimes animalistic. His body radiates heat, his voice roars. He's often portrayed as having features of a lion or dragon, a beast that judges and punishes in the same breath. In some depictions, his eyes burn like coals. In others, he's shrouded in smoke, his form barely visible through the fury. But what makes Sathanas unique isn't just his rage, it's how justified it feels. Wrath, after all, starts as a reaction to pain. It begins with something real, a wrong, a betrayal, an injustice. Sathanas takes that spark and turns it into wildfire. He convinces you that forgiveness is weakness, that justice can only be paid in blood. That peace is a lie people tell themselves to avoid doing what needs to be done. In medieval writings, Sathanas often appears as a punisher, not just a ruler. Some grimoires say he governs the boiling pits, the chambers where the damned are scourged. Not because he enjoys suffering, but because he sees it as fair. Wrath for him is justice taken to its extreme, not chaos. Revenge. This is also where the confusion with Lucifer deepens. Over time, the two figures began to blend. In literature, in pop culture, in modern theology, Lucifer and Satan are often treated as the same. But in many older texts, especially in demonology and early Christian mysticism, they are distinct. Lucifer is the light that rebelled. Sathanas is the flame that burns in response. One falls from pride, the other rises in rage. Symbolically, Sathanas represents the moment when pain stops seeking healing and starts seeking retribution. Wrath is seductive because it feels like control, like power, like action. But it's a trap, because it always demands more. More anger, more punishment, more fuel. And eventually, all that's left is fire. Sathanas doesn't tempt you to act, he dares you to. He justifies the hate. He rationalizes the violence. He calls it strength. And the worst part? Sometimes it works. Because wrath, like fire, always starts with something real. But in Sathanas' hands, it never ends there. Belphegor, Prince of Sloth. Of all the 7 princes, Belphegor might seem the least threatening at first glance. He doesn't storm into the world on a chariot of fire. He doesn't seduce. He doesn't scream. He barely moves. And yet, his influence is everywhere. He's the voice that says, "Do it tomorrow." The thought that whispers, "Why bother?" The invisible weight behind every abandoned dream and every year lost to waiting. He is sloth, but not in the way most people understand it. Sloth isn't laziness in the usual sense. It's not about naps or disinterest. In Belphegor's hands, sloth becomes something far deeper. A spiritual decay, a collapse of purpose, a refusal to engage with the world not out of exhaustion, but out of indifference. Belphegor's name likely comes from Baal Peor, an ancient fertility god worshipped by the Moabites. Over time, As with many foreign deities, he was demonized, associated with perversion, filth, and stagnation. Some medieval texts claimed he tempted people with inventions, ideas of great potential that never got built. Others saw him as a mockery of divine order, a figure who lounged in waste and whispered brilliant excuses for doing nothing. His appearance is among the most grotesque in demonology. He's often depicted as slumped, bloated, sometimes literally seated on a toilet or sunken into a pit of decay. He may wear the crown of a nobleman, but his kingdom is stillness. His throne is rot. His court is made up of silence and dust. But don't mistake Belphegor for a fool. His personality is sharp beneath the surface. He's intelligent, frustratingly so. He speaks in riddles, oozes sarcasm, and watches more than he talks. In many accounts, he doesn't need to convince people to fall. He just waits for them to give up. And most do. Because Belphegor doesn't attack dreams, he lets them starve. He doesn't kill ambition, he distracts it. He doesn't need fire or violence, just enough delay, enough comfort, enough self-doubt, and eventually you stop reaching. Where Mammon promises more, Belphegor insists you don't need anything at all. Where Lucifer seeks rebellion, Belphegor offers numbness. And that's his greatest weapon. His domain is especially dangerous because it feels safe, familiar. Sloth wraps itself in soft rationalizations. You're too tired. It's not the right time. What difference does it make? And slowly, you sink. The days blur, the fire fades, and the world keeps moving without you. In grimoires, Belphegor is often connected to the corruption of the powerful, rulers who stop ruling, inventors who stop building, thinkers who give up before they begin. He doesn't inspire tyranny. He inspires apathy, the kind that leaves empires to crumble while their kings stare out the window, bored of everything. Symbolically, Belphegor stands for surrender, not dramatic collapse, but the slow, quiet letting go. Sloth in its demonic form isn't just rest taken too far. It's the refusal to act when it matters most. It's knowing you could do something and choosing not to. And in that choice, Belphegor thrives. Because he knows that a dream delayed long enough dies, one way or another. They're called princes, but that title doesn't quite capture what they are. These aren't just figures sitting on thrones somewhere deep in hell. They are movements, forces, patterns, reflections of the darkest corners of human behavior, given form. Lucifer, the proud rebel who believed he could rise higher than his maker. Mammon, the hoarder, worshipping gold not for what it is, but for what it can buy. Asmodeus, who takes the beauty of desire and twists it into ruin. Leviathan, whose envy turns admiration into quiet hatred. Beelzebub, who devours without end and leaves only rot behind. Sathanas, the wrathful flame who sees vengeance as justice. And Belphegor, who doesn't tempt with action, but with silence. Each one tied to a sin. Each sin tied to something painfully human. Some traditions say they rule in hell like monarchs, each overseeing their own domain of torment. Others suggest they don't reside in hell at all, but here, around us, beneath the surface of everyday life. Not as monsters hiding in the dark, but as habits, impulses, and excuses. The whisper that justifies betrayal, the craving that outweighs reason, the voice that tells you to lash out, to give up, to take what you want, regardless of the cost. What makes them dangerous isn't just their power, it's their familiarity. They're not demons who demand worship. They don't need you to summon them in a ritual circle. You just have to listen, give them time, give them space. And most of the time, that's all they need, because they know exactly how to wait. And in the end, what you see in these 7 isn't just the architecture of hell, it's the blueprint of our worst tendencies, amplified, personified, and crowned. You don't need to believe in them for them to work. You just need to forget to question what they've slowly convinced you to become. So whether you call them myths, metaphors, or something far more literal, the princes are still here.